Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. My name is GB99, and today we're going to be starting a new series. This is going to be a bi-weekly thing, maybe once a month, or maybe just, occasionally whenever I feel like it. But I'm going to be starting a Q&A series where you can ask me questions over at GB99 YouTube at yahoo.com, and I'll answer 3 to 5 good ones an episode. Before I continue, I'd like to apologize. I'm coming down from a terrible cold. I was just hospitalized on the couch for 6 days straight, and I'm still coughing a lot, still blowing my nose and sniffling and even stuttering. So apologies if there's any audio cuts or if you hear any gross sniffling or anything like that. But anyway, back to the questions. They can be about anything, they can be about League or other games or me personally in my life. I'll also be using this as a sort of personal vlog type series. If there's any big event that happens, if, let's say PAX Prime rolls around. I'm going to PAX Prime this year, so before I go, especially if there's a big League tournament there, I'll go ahead and make a video beforehand telling where you can find me if you'd like to meet me and say hi, and another video afterwards talking about what I got to see, what I got to play, and my thoughts on the games, the tournaments, and everything that went on. But anyway, let's get into some questions. Patrick asks, why do you think Korean and Chinese pro players are considered so much better than the rest? Is it really that big of a skill difference, or just hype from not being in the eye of NA that much? The reason that Korean and Chinese pro players are I think they are slightly better than the rest, and the reason behind that is it's a cultural difference. If you want to be a pro player and you're from North America, then you don't have to be the #1 top laner or the #1 mid laner or whatever in the world to make a living playing League of Legends. You have 310 million people in just, the United States alone that will watch you, that will idolize you, that will follow your every move. And you can have a website, you can stream nonstop, you can have a YouTube channel. And you can do all these things that will essentially make you money and make it possible for you to make a living off League of Legends, even though you aren't the #1 player in the world, even though you didn't win the Season 2 Grand Finals. Even though there's better people out there, people will still follow you and watch you and, essentially give you the opportunity to make a living off of League of Legends. In Korea, I think it's completely different. Koreans focus solely on becoming the best player, and they don't focus at all on building themselves up as a person or as an idol or, as someone to look up to. If you look at the StarCraft 2 Grandmaster ladder, you see all these people named just vertical line. You know the vertical line key right above enter? There's so many people just named like vertical line times 10, and you wonder why that is, but then you realize if you get matched up against them and then they go a weird build at you, you have no idea who they are. So, if you run into them at a tournament, you can't prepare for that weird build. If you see, Idra going some crazy Zerg rush and he's developing this new strategy of just Zerg rushing, just 6-pooling every single game, 6-pooling. And, you'll know that he likes to 6-pool. And when you run into him at a tournament, you'll be prepared for a 6-pool. But you have no idea who these Korean players are. You have no idea who owns what strategies. And they sacrifice any sort of possibility for building themselves up as a big famous person for the sake of just getting better at the game. And even though there obviously are big people that everyone looks up to, they focus much more on just being better at the game rather than streaming their games to make money, And I think that's just a cultural difference, and in the end, I think that's why they're slightly ahead. China is kind of the same, except, obviously you'd say, if you're educated enough, I guess you would say, but what about their billion people? Well, they have a bunch of internet censorship, so I think that kind of balances out, and they still end up focusing more on becoming the best players in the world rather than streaming to a large audience of people to make money. Harry asks, what do you think is a healthy balance of games and life? That's a good question. I think that in the end, it's completely up to you. As long as you get some solid exercise, get some fresh air, and eat right, you can decide how much you want to include games in your life. If you want to be a professional player, or if you want to be a reviewer and spend, 12 or 16 hours a day just non-stop video games, making videos or streaming or doing whatever at the computer, I think that's perfectly okay, as long as you make sure that you get plenty of exercise, make sure you eat right, and make sure you get some fresh air every once in a while. In the end, it's completely up to you. If you want to go to that extreme, as long as you take care of yourself, that's completely okay. If you want to just work a 9-to-5 job and come home and play video games for a couple hours, that's obviously very fine too. In the end, as long as you take care of yourself, it's completely up to you how much you want to include games in your life. Andre, sorry if I'm butchering your name, asks, what is your favorite game and why? I don't think I could pick a favorite game specifically. If you were to think, let's say we're comparing League of Legends to Dota 2. There's so many differences between the two games. They're just two completely different experiences. And even though they are both MOBAs, they're in the same genre, essentially. They're just two completely different experiences. So then compare League or Dota to StarCraft, and then there's even more differences. And then if you compare them to a single-player game or something, it's just apples and oranges. I don't think I can pick a favorite game because different games offer different gratifying experiences. But if I were to pick my top 5 favorite experiences, I'd probably have to say BioShock Infinite, Metro 2033, Bastion, Red Dead Redemption, and the Sly Cooper series. And if I had to pick my favorite, it'd probably be Sly 2. I love games with a good narrative, and that's probably a huge reason why I love these games so much. But in the end, I think I grew up playing these games. I grew up playing the BioShock series. I grew up playing the Sly Cooper series. The Sly Cooper series was some of my first games that I've ever played. And I think that's part of why I love them so much and why I can always go back and play through them. I do, of course, love the classics. I love Thief 2. I love the Half-Life series, GTA, Planescape Torment, Psychonauts. But I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I'm comparatively young. If you were to compare me to someone like, another big reviewer, most reviewers, most professional critics, professional game critics, if you look at Total Biscuit or Yahtzee or anyone that works at a major magazine or website, most of them are, in their 20s, in their 30s even. And I'm very young compared to them. And also, it doesn't really help that I lived in a very conservative Christian household until I was about 10 or maybe 12 even. And that, my parents were very reluctant to let me play games that, I was shooting people, and they don't want to, it was still a very, very, it's fun to look back on now, but it was still a very bit of, I had to fight for being able to play through Halo, and I had to fight for being able to play some of these games. So I didn't get to play them when they first came out. I didn't get to play Thief 2 when it was first released. I didn't get to play the Half-Life series when it was released, or Planescape Torment when it was released. And I think that's part of why I don't hold them in such high esteem with these other games. I think there is a bunch of nostalgia blindness, really. That's part of the reason why I hold these games in such high esteem. But in the end, I just love a good game narrative, and I love just some of these I just love these games, I guess. The gameplay's so fun and the stories are just incredible, and I grew up playing them. So that's probably why these are my top five favorite games. Another guy whose name I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce asks, why do you think the League community is so bad? Okay, it's simple. The reason the League community is so bad is because people get paid to play League of Legends. There are professional players out there. Excuse me. And when you watch them on a tournament or when you watch them on a stream, you don't get to see all of the information that they have to have. It's not like StarCraft, where if there's a huge, incredible player and you're watching him stream or you're watching him in a tournament, you're like, wow, how is he doing that? How is that even humanly possible? It still takes a lot of skill to play League. It still takes a lot of knowledge, but you don't get to see it through the gameplay the way other genres allow that. And because of that, a lot of people say, I can do that. I'm as good as that. I'm not that bad compared to him. and then they say, hold my beer, they jump into solo queue, and then immediately someone will die, and they'll just go on tilt, they'll rage, they'll throw swears around at everyone, and they'll just get in a terrible mood. And I think that's really the biggest problem as to why just the MOBA community in general is so bad. There's the opportunity for you to play as a pro, but you don't see how long that will actually take to get. You don't see how long it will take to reach something like that. And because of that, a lot of people get really frustrated in just seconds of, someone will die and they won't realize that the game is far from over, but they'll treat it as if it is, and then they'll end up losing because of it, and then all 4 of the other teammates will get mad at him because he made them lose the game, and then, it's just a downward spiral from there. And essentially, that's why the League community is so bad. And finally, Luke asks, do you think Riot does a good job of balancing the game? If you were to ask me that a year ago or even 6 months ago, I'd probably say no. If any of you remember when Dominion, it's fast, it's fun. When Dominion was first released, it was kind of rough. If you remember Xin Zhao, he was still very bad. He was a very, very terrible champion. And apart from Evelyn, who hadn't received her rework yet, apart from maybe even Shaco or Poppy or, the general odd bad champions, not to say Poppy or Shaco or, not to say any of them are bad, but they're considered the lowest tier when it comes to competitive play. And he was down there with the rest of them. He was considered one of the worst champions in the game. And right before Dominion was released, they nerfed Xin Zhao. And everyone was like, what? He's already the worst champion in the game, essentially. Why the hell are you nerfing him? And then people slowly realized Riot was balancing him for Dominion. He was apparently really good in Dominion, so they were nerfing him to balance that out. And, that's a terrible mistake. If they want to have competitive Summoner's Rift, if they want to have an esport that's taken seriously, they can't balance their game based around the lesser played version, I guess. And it's, they've made plenty of mistakes like that over the years, I guess, and that's really frustrated me at times. But now they're pretty good at balancing it, and I trust them with the game, I guess. There's still some instances where I don't really agree with them. I still think that they focus a bit too much on nerfing the best champions rather than buffing the worst. But in the end, I think, I trust them with the game, and I think they do a pretty good job of balancing it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this first episode of my Q&A series. If you have any suggestions or feedback, go ahead and leave a comment. And if you would like to submit your own question for the next... excuse me. God, I have to fix that cough. If you would like to submit your own question for the next Q&A, feel free to email me at gbay99youtube@yahoo.com. Thank you very much for watching. Good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.